Good afternoon. Do you mind turning the other microphone off? We've got get rid of that. Right, thanks. Maybe it's yours. All right, okay. Well, good afternoon and welcome to our EB5 panel. So we were asked to focus on changes to the law. As people might know, we just had a new immigration act. So as we have new legislation and that's legal, perhaps Ignacio, you could just give us what you see as the principal changes in the law and sort of what the position was and how it's been improved.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the event. Thank you, Mark, for passing the ball to me on this one. Obviously, this panel is extraordinarily well capable of answering this question, so I'm happy to lead the conversation. I think the key features of the new legislation, which are constantly being talked about by investors and regional centers alike. Number one, the fact that the program has a 5-year window, which is likely going to be renewed. I think the foundations of the EB5 program are stronger than ever for a solid, predictable path forward. And I think that's going to be great for investors and for regional centers. Number two, everybody's talking about the visa allocation or visa reservation system and the categories that were created. We need like hours to explain it. We'll do our best to try and explain it briefly so you understand the essence of it. And number three, visa processing. And that has two subparts. Number one, there's a huge improvement in the program, which now allows for simultaneous filing of the visa petition with the request to get the green card in the United States. It's called adjustment of status. We should talk about that because all of my clients are jumping on top of that. And lastly, we're talking about visa processing. The program created certain opportunities for faster visa processing for rural projects, and that needs to be discussed. But there's a big question mark, and we need to all address it, which is, when are we going to start seeing visa approvals? And I think we should all chime in because I'm sure we all have different opinions.
Excuse me. Thank you, Ignacio. So one of the things you mentioned that to me is, do you mind just turning that one off? Sorry. One of the things you mentioned to me, which is really important, is adjustment of status and concurrent filing. So Matt, I can see you nodding your head. CMB, big regional center, then I'll ask some of the others. Are you seeing demand for that? And what actually is it, right? What does it mean? What is it? And what demand do you see?
Yeah, so to kind of keep it in layman's terms, what concurrent filing does is it allows an investor who's already in the United States on another visa category to be able to file their I-485 petition, their adjustment of status petition alongside their I-526 petition, and they're given temporary work status.
What is an I-526 petition?
Yeah, their it's actually now called an I-526E petition. They've kind of changed the naming conventions for the petitions a little bit. But what that is it's the very first petition that an investor files for review of their investment that they've made into the EB5 project. And so that's going to include information on their background. It's going to link information to a project petition that the regional center has filed that outlines all the details of the investment project that they've filed as well. So, but the concurrent filing, just to kind of jump back to that, what that is really going to do is it's going to allow people to not have to sit there and wait for an adjudication before they're able to continue working in the United States.
Okay, Anubhuti, you're behind my head. You run the Indian market, but I know you also there in the US. How are you seeing this concurrent filing impact the market? Maybe she can't hear. So perhaps I'll redirect that question to Houston EB5.
Hello, yeah. So I think concurrent filing has been giving a lot of positive impact because when we have been speaking to the clients, I think that's the factor right now because in the past, people would have to wait for the education before they go through adjustment of status or before they go through counsel process. So our largest client base lives in the US, the people who are on H-1B visas and they have the approved green card, but they have to wait for a longer time until they, especially Indian and Chinese. So this gives us a very positive momentum. Whenever we speak to the clients now, they know that if they file the I-526 petition, they have the opportunity to change their adjustment of status from H-1B to the EB5. So that's something that's getting the momentum everywhere. It's not only H-1B, but even I have been speaking to the few clients here, so their kids are studying on a F1, and when they got to know that while filing I-526, they can change their instant status from F1 to the EB5, they will get the EAD and advanced payroll. That is something that everybody gets motivated, because when your age freezes and you are out of the sponsorship, whether from the educational perspective or from the job perspective, that is something really been a motivating factor for investors, and we are getting a lot of momentum and traction over there.
I think what you're saying is, if you're in America and you're a student, or if you're in America or you're a temporary worker, this new program gives you ability to stay in America and to work, right?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, it will untie your sponsorship. Basically, that's a great advantage. Before March 15, 2022, before this new law, you have to wait for an approval, and that definitely, approval takes from 6 months to 24 months timeline, even in some cases 36 months. So that has been killing the investors' confidence. But right now, even people know that if the approval gets a longer time, at least they can change their status, and they can live, indefinitely until they get the approval. So this is, I think, the one of the most, I would say, the selling or most motivating factor for any investor who wants to file AB5. As I told you, people who lives outside of the US or inside of the US, I think this is the most prominent factor which we have realized that has been a very selling factor, very convincing factor for the investor, irrespective of where they live.
Ashley, you're a general counsel of a regional center. So thinking about the factors that Ignacio kindly summarized for us, what do you see as beneficial for your investors with a change in the law?
Ignacio did a great job of kind of outlining high level what some of the changes will be. One thing that wasn't touched on that I deal with a lot in my role is that, one of the big program changes is also sort of the overhaul and emphasis around compliance. And so what do I mean by that? Who can participate in the EB5 program as a regional center, as agents, as finders, and sort of, what kind of reporting needs to be done, what kind of background needs to be done, what needs to be done on an ongoing basis. And I think that's a positive for everyone in the ecosystem, including investors, right? Because we're all aware it's a significant capital expenditure. And so the more things that we can do in place to make sure that bad actors are weeded out, and that there's a focus around who's in and the things that we're doing on a compliance perspective, that adds to our ability to have trust in the program and operate more efficiently.
So, following up on what you just said, right? If I'm an investor and I'm worried about the security of my money and giving it to a regional center, what specific protections are there in the new law? What's there that helps me be confident that my money is safe and being spent in the right way?
That's a great question. So, there's kind of a litany of things, and I will say, first and foremost, no matter what's in place from a securities and compliance standpoint, it is still an investment, right? So you cannot completely, mitigate against, whatever risk might be from a market risk standpoint. But you are seeing some different things. For example, the requirement of either use of an auditor, for example, or use of folks in terms of oversight of the funds. And I think good regional centers were already having some of these practices already, so it's not as much of an adaptation. But I think it's good that the rest of the ecosystem is kind of being forced to put these things in place so that there are kind of more checkpoints in place, whether it's auditors and escrow agents and USCIS agents getting more training on this point and being able to ask smarter questions and go through and critique business plans and all things that are ultimately going to be helpful to the investor.
Steve, Ignacio mentioned the set-aside categories. What is that? How does that work with the project? And bluntly, if I'm an investor, why do I care?
Right. Well, so the set-asides are 20% for rural projects of all visas, 10% for high unemployment areas, and 2% for government infrastructure projects. I haven't heard of any government infrastructure projects yet. So what that means is if you invest in a rural project, for example, you will benefit from that set aside.
Okay, Ignacio, so suppose I'm Chinese or Indian, a lot of Indians here in Dubai. Why do I care about set-asides?
You know, the new system offers tremendous opportunities because I have to be honest with you, if you're a new investor in the EB5 program, you can basically go to the top of the list. No waiting list. And that's not fair to older investors, people that invested in 2018, 2019, 2020, and 21. But that's the way the law was written, and I can't change that. So if I'm advocating for you as a new investor, the first thing you need to know is that if you're investing in one of these projects and it qualifies as a high unemployment area, which has 1,000 visas set aside, or it qualifies as a rural area with a 2,000 visas set aside, or an infrastructure project with 200 visas, if you're investing in one of these areas, you jump to the head of the list. There is no waiting list for you. And that's incredibly attractive. Why? Because countries that are very large and have a strong tradition of immigration into the United States, this is China, India, but not only China and India, there are other countries that have tradition of immigration to the United States. There have been times when Korea has had a waiting list for EB5 visas. There's been times when Brazil has had a waiting list for EB5 visas. You go straight to the front of the line with no waiting list. So if you're looking at considering an EB5 investment right now, is this the right time? Yes. Why? You're coming into a fresh new program. The program is better than ever. The foundations are really well grounded for the next 5 to 10 years. And if you're a new investor, you go where? To the front of the list.
Right, I'm going to try and go over my head again. So, Anubhuti, can you hear me?
I can. It's
You're mute,
Anubhuti.
Anubhuti.
But I can.
You're gonna.
Okay. Anubhuti, we can't hear you.
Hi,
There
Mark.
we are.
So nice to join everybody virtually. There's been some light disconnect, but I'm trying to catch up on the discussion.
Let's go back to the question I asked before, which was, why is this concurrent filing thing so important? And EB5 Capital, major regional center, what filing trends do you see? What's happening in the marketplace because of that? Let's pass on that. Matt, let's come back to you. So thinking of sort of this whole panel is supposed to be about changes in the law. How are the changes in the law impacting the projects you currently have for offer? And how does that make the projects that you currently have for offer more attractive?
Yeah, so and I'm going to lever a lot of what Ignacio just said. The reality is that it's a fresh program, and so the projects that we currently have available are in that TEA category. They fit the one of the categories where visas are set aside. So we're seeing an increase in demand from parts of the world that, frankly, we're starting to lose interest in the program because of the long wait times. We've had many investors from China, India, and Vietnam move forward since the kind of reinstatement of the program. And I think you're going to continue to see that trend move forward. Certainly, we're going to be focused on projects in that TEA category and in that rural category. And I think that, it's good for the investors. It's unfortunately bad for the investors in the past, but it's good for the investors that are interested in using this program now. And I want to touch on one thing that's really important. This is a program that since 2015 went through ups and downs, had a lot of stopping and starting, these very short-term extensions, and a lot of efforts to reform this program that were stopped at various points in time for various interests. And the reality is that the people that wrote this bill, Senator Leahy and Senator Grassley, they wanted to see this program really focus on the parts of the US economy that really needed job creation. And these are these high unemployment areas and these rural areas. Both Grassley and Leahy are from rural states, Vermont and Iowa. And so they put special weight on an effort to try and get investment dollars focused into those areas. And they provided additional benefits for people who invest into those areas. And to be honest with you, I think it's a win-win for the US economy and now for the EB5 investor who gets to take advantage of the ability to jump the line if they're making an investment into one of these areas that is truly a high unemployment or a rural area.
Ashley? Stereo.
Apologies for the original question you were asking.
Asking about, I asked the same question to you. How are the changes in the law impacting the projects you currently have in the market, and why are those projects attractive to investors?
Great question. I mean, I think our ethos hasn't, we've been in the market for 10 plus years, and I think our ethos hasn't changed in terms of what we think makes a great EB5 project, right? Which is something that's soundly underwritten from an investment standpoint. We're primarily focused on large scale real estate construction projects, working with the best developers in the country who have a long, in some cases, 100+ year track record of development and not defaulting, getting the best legal real estate, financial and legal and real estate protections that we can, and doing what we can to, which is part of my job, have a real seat at the cap table and be able to step in and negotiate and protect our investors. And so that hasn't really changed program to program in terms of what we're looking for and the type of projects we're looking for. And at the end of the day, we're not going to try to shoehorn what's happening now and change our model because it's proven and it works in terms of being able to sign folks up, help them get their green cards, and ultimately return capital, which remains the goal. What may be unique to us relative to the new program changes is, we've done some larger scale multi-phase projects, and so the new law has created some interesting opportunities for us because we're now going into new phases of projects that previously had approved business plans that still are able to take capital, and based on our understanding of the new regime with the proper filings will also allow that project to be approved. So that's kind of created some unique product in the market for us.
Thanks. Steve?
So we're focused on expedited processing. We offer investments in addiction treatment centers.
What is expedited processing?
So expedited processing means that addiction treatment is a national crisis in the U.S. About 300 people every day die from drug overdose, and because it's a national problem of interest to the U.S. government, the national interest, it means that investor petitions go to the front of the queue, and our recent investors are approved in about 6 months, compared to several years. We have yet to see how long it takes petitions under the new program to be approved, but historically it's been 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. So to us, definitely after passing of new law, so what we have been focusing on the project that should be compliance with the new RIA Act. And afterwards, we always try to strive to come up with a project that should be in the rural area. Even I was briefing earlier that when the word rural comes in, so people thought of that it could be in the far-flung areas, it's not a good investment opportunity. So what we try to come up with a project.
So a rural area is one of these set-asides, right?
With a set-aside visa of 20%. So we try to come up with a project that should be.
So it's one of the ones in Ignacio's language where you can go to the front of the line, is that right?
Yeah, yeah, so front of the line. So because it's a fresh program, everybody comes, so everybody comes in the queue on the top, and especially if it's a rural project. And we have selected a project which is near to San Antonio and the Austin, a very booming economy and booming areas over there. There are one city called it's the wine country in the Hill County. We got the last piece of the land which was counted as a rural, which is a set-aside visa of 20%. So that was a great opportunity which was complying with the new RI Act, and definitely it was qualifying for a set-aside visa. I want to only touch one point on set-aside visa. So as per the new statistic, so unused and carryover visas are approximately 4,000 visas in set-aside category. Why I'm focusing on that, because there are a lot of Indians and Chinese or Vietnamese. We are speaking about the set-aside visa a lot since morning, but only just to remind you that even out of 4,000 visas, every country has a 7% allocation as an layman term. So approximately 300 visas for every country. So 300 visas including all families. So basically we have 100 to 150 visas available even in the actually rural category set aside visas. So what I'm trying to tell you that if someone is really interested into EB5 program, the new program came into the market with a lot of clarity now until 2027. So they have to go fast. They cannot wait. They should not be thinking that this 20% set aside visa category and the visas will be available for a long time. It could be run out at any point in time, because as of today it is current and we don't know that how many petitions have been filed under this category. So waiting and just thinking that this visa category will be available for the Indian, Chinese or Vietnamese or the countries with the retrogression will be available for a long time. It can run out anytime. So if anyone is really looking for, so they have to really act fast. That's my sincere advice to anyone who's looking for EB5.
Fair point. So you also mentioned, I think, Ignacio, that the program is now permanently, or not permanently, but has a longer term extension. How does sort of grandfathering, I mean, we had people we had a program suspension, people's cases stopped processing, there was a lot of, what's all this grandfathering? How is it relevant to what you were saying before?
Grandfathering. So clearly the program had a very successful history before the new legislation came into place. In fact, I think we can all say that the success of the program led to its changes. Why? Because the United States realized that investments at $500,000 to obtain permanent residency were so low that the market really overwhelmed the program and created waiting lists, which, of course, that's the nature of trying these immigration programs. You have to learn. And what the government learned was that they needed more supervision of projects, and they needed more to increase the investment threshold. And you may not know this, but the government tried to increase the investment threshold to $900,000 briefly. And the reaction from the market was, that's just too high. So the investment threshold right now is $800,000. In fact, it used to be $500,000, and the people who invested before the new program entered into effect don't have to increase their old investment. That's really important. The new legislation did not require old investors to increase the investment to the new amount, okay? At the same time, the new legislation created some safeguards for investors so that if the program were, for any reason, to experience changes in the future, the current legislation would be the controlling legislation for visa petitions filed in the next 5 years when the program is in effect. And that level of certainty was something that legislators realized was really important to immigrant investors. They wanted to be able to obtain predictability. And I think that's really reflective of the whole nature of the transaction. It's an expensive investment. People want to get their money back. I think all of the regional centers here, and I have the pleasure to work with almost all of them with great success, have been able to return capital to their investors. But they also want predictability in the legislation. And the new legislation did that exceptionally well.
Thanks. So I think what you're saying is it got more predictable, right? A little bit less chaotic and more predictable EB5 process.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, yeah, to answer that question, yeah, absolutely. The program got a lot more predictable, a lot more transparent, and now you can have some trust in the program. One of the big things that kept getting talked about when the program had lapsed is what's going to happen to my petition. You know, there was no clear language in place that said whether or not the government was going to continue to adjudicate petitions that were already on file, or if they were just going to reject them or deny them and send them back. And it created a lot of chaos within the industry. We saw new investor groups rise up to be able to say, wait a minute, what about me? You know, I have to be able to depend on rule of law. I'm coming to the United States. Should I trust that the US government is not just going to flip-flop on their laws and kick me out of the country at any point in time? So these changes are certainly something that's helpful to the program.
So we have these changes in the program, right? However, it seems to me that the one core thing that hasn't changed is you need to make sure that the project you're investing in is a quality project, right? So at CMB, and then I'll ask the other regional centers the same question, at CMB, what do you do to make sure that you're offering quality projects for investors?
You know, CMB we're one of the largest regional centers in the industry, but we're also one of the largest, if not the largest company by way of the amount of employees that we have and the roles that those employees perform. You know, we're not a real estate developer. We are a regional center. We operate somewhat similarly to a bank or a private lending office. And what we do is we look at these projects, and by the way, this has never really changed. This is something that we've always done as a company. But every single one of these projects we underwrite similarly to any other traditional lender. So we look at hundreds of projects a year, and we pick the ones that we think are best for this program and that are best for the industry. And that we think that are going to be marketable to our investors. Not only that, is we're focused on the goals of our investor. Make sure it's going to create the jobs, make sure it's going to repay the capital. And how do you get capital repaid? You got to make sure that you're working with a quality borrower. You got to make sure that your loan agreement has teeth in it. The other thing you got to do is you got to be prepared to fight for those investors throughout their entire immigration process. You're not just getting those investors to sign up once and then saying good luck. You are with those investors until they get their money back and when they get their conditions removed on their permanent green card. And any of the challenges along the way, your regional center should be looking out for you. So, you know, what are we doing when we're looking at projects? We're looking at projects that we think can work, but we're also, you know, preparing ourselves and making sure that we're picking the ones that we think we're going to be able to have success for with our clients and that are going to give them what they need.
So you're in charge of projects, I think, at CMB. If you're an investor, what is the one single question that you would ask a regional center that people don't ask?
That's a great question. What's the question I would ask that people don't ask? You know, I think what's happened over the years is the industry has educated the clients on questions to ask. In fact, we were one of the first regional centers to do that. We'd published this giant list of things, due diligence questions to ask any regional center. And the reason why we did that is because we wanted them to compare and contrast. We have a robust team. We have the ability to talk to these people day in, day out. When someone calls us, there's someone there to pick up the phone. We're not a mom and pop operation. And so we know people do due diligence on our projects. We expect them to. And we expect them to compare us and contrast us against the other projects. So we hope that no stone gets left unturned. But if I'm going to ask a question of any regional center, it's going to be, are you going to be around in 6 years? Are you going to be around in 7 years? What's your legacy look like? What's the future of your company going to look like? Who are the core people that are going to be there to fight for me? Not just to get my first petition approval, not just, 2 years after that. Who's going to be around? Tell me about the track record of your company, but tell me what your plan is in the future. Because I want to know that that company is not going anywhere. Are they going to have a revenue stream that can support me? Are they even interested in EB5 in the long term? CMB as a company, that's what we do. We do EB5. This is our business. We're a family company. We're in the second generation of that family company right now. Noreen Hogan is our president of our company. And the reality is that there's really only a couple other companies. I know USIF is one of those companies as well that has a legacy of sorts. But the reality is there's not many of us that are strictly doing EB5, that's our day in, day out. A lot of us are just an entity that we've set up to raise money for a business, or they're a one-off, or they're taking on one or two projects. But there's very few regional centers that are in this for the long haul. And I think that's huge. That's key.
So Ashley, same to you. When your team go looking for projects, how do you make sure that your investors have quality projects and quality options?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for us, I kind of touched on it a bit during the last discussion, but for us, it starts with the underwriter, the developer, and who's also around the project internally and externally. For us, if you look about pretty much every project we do, and you look around the table, who do you see? You see on the senior debt side or the bank side, you see Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and Wells Fargo and folks like this, large reputable hedge funds, etc. And then on the developer side, you're seeing
you're using some terms. Senior debt just means the primary bank loan, right?
Yeah, so the primary, oftentimes in EB5 projects, particularly those that are real estate construction focused, a lot of times you have a senior bank or someone who's taking a senior debt position. Then you might have EB5 capital or other capital that's taking a subordinate position, so a position below, and then you have the developer in their equity position.
And you said underwriter. That's what's an underwriter?
So I was talking about underwriting, which is kind of what Matt was talking about as well, sort of all the things that go into saying, is this a credible project? Is this a relatively safe and de-risk project? And how do you do that? Some of that is just the experience that we all have in terms of looking at the core numbers, in terms of looking at the market, but then it also goes to a bit who you're working with, who's at the table as well, which is how I kind of dovetail into talking about some of those institutions.
So what's special about USIF and project selection? What should people know?
Yeah, so I think for us, like I said, it's who we work across from, and it's also who we work with. So just some examples. For example, on our legal side, our securities counsel, so the person who puts together all of our offerings and is in charge of our compliance, etc., was a former division chief at the Securities and Exchange Commission for the United States. Our real estate finance attorneys, one of them sits on the board of the Durst organizations, one of the largest, most reputable real estate firms, real estate development companies in the world, frankly. And so for us, it's about assembling, we can kind of go down the list, assembling the best team of experts internally, and then going into deals with some of the strongest, financial partners that we could be working in tandem with across the table. So getting, like I said, getting some of those banking institutions, entering a relationship with them. And then on our end, I think it's having a perspective, and I think Matt touched on this a bit, of also our position is to be a watchdog and to not be passive. We don't simply pool the capital, loan it out, and wait for it to come back in. We put a lot of protections in on the front end, and we're very vigilant. To give an example, before we write a developer, or before we send a developer money, which happens in draws, meaning we send the money over time tied to their construction spending, we'll get third-party expert reports from folks who are experts in the real estate industry to actually vet that request and vet the feasibility of it, get the backup, get the bank statements, get the expenditures before an investor dollar goes into the project. And we were doing that long before any of the changes in the compliance program. So it's that level of detail, getting information agreements from developers, getting regular reporting from developers, physically going to the project, talking to the construction manager on the project. It's not a set it and forget it thing for us.
Gotcha. So Steve, your project is a little different to some of the others here.
Yes.
How did you find it, and why is it any good?
Yes, so We call our model a recession-proof business model because the addiction industry is, unfortunately, for the U.S., it's booming. It's only getting worse, and 80 to 90% of our income comes from insurance, either the government insurance program or private insurance. So back to your question about asking what's a question that investors should ask, and I would say that how do we know in this age of COVID and probably future pandemics coming up, how do we know that that traditional real estate projects are going to hold up? Because we've seen many of them not do very well. We've seen of course, hotels have been hard hit, even office properties. And so how have they held up during the pandemic, and how will they hold up in future pandemics that are probably coming up?
So I think what you're saying is, with your project, people are investing in a facility that treats patients with drug addictions, and the need for that isn't going to dry up anytime soon.
That's right. There's no let up in sight, unfortunately. The drug addiction problem is only getting worse.
Thanks. Houston.
Yeah, so for us, so we are unique in a way that we are vertically integrated regional center. So what does it mean? That we invest into our own projects. So we have a company called DC Partners. So anyone if knows about that Houston area, so we are into the building and construction of the luxury condos. So almost many luxury condos, downtown condos of the Houston are being developed by DC Partners. So we have our own brand image and reputation all the time. So we invest into our own projects. We don't broker, we don't look at other projects. And it's the reason that all of the past projects are the award-winning projects from the number of the lifestyle magazines and lifestyle construction and development companies over there. So when we select the project, most of the times when client and investor come to me, I always ask them that, you have to look into 5 major areas that's very important for an investor to understand. Number one, that whether all the sources are backed out, because there are a lot of these sophisticated terms, and what I've realized that investors don't understand a lot about that, mezz loan or senior secured bank loan, what's their hierarchy in their capital stake. They really don't understand until they hire the attorney, and attorney do a due diligence on us, and then they would let them understand what these terms mean and what's the meaning of all of this stuff. So what I always ask them as a layman, you have to ask from any regional center that whether all the sources are backed out, the source of funds. So you should have the clear-cut plan of the backing out of the source of fund and the uses of fund. That's very important, because US immigration doesn't relate how much the return we are offering to the investor, what they are looking for. They are looking for the completion of project, because that will give you a job. So number one, you have to ask the sources of funds and the uses of funds. Those are being backed out. Number two, definitely you have to go through an econometric study, a job creation study, that how much the job creation is being created by the project only from the construction of the project. It used to be that we could have used all the indirect job, but right now we can use only 90% of the indirect creation of the job and 10% of the operational job. So 90% is a huge amount. So you have to see that how much the cushion it has been providing. And number three, which we need to ask, that the comps, statistic comps of that project, that when the project is being built up, what are the current comps, or what are the comps are looking like in terms of if it's a multi-family housing, what are the rents are going into the market compared to the other markets. If you are into the hospitality industry, what are their average utilization, occupancy, rent. So you have to look into the comps, because ultimately the project will be built up and that will be operational, and that all will depend upon the comps. And number 4 important things, that the point you have to ask, what is the exit strategy. That's very important aspect from the investor perspective, that how I will get back my money, because we are in this kind of industry. And I've been telling that there are 10 to 15 good regional centers. They have been doing pretty good job. So it's not only us or CMB or US immigration, but I would say there are 10, 15, there are good people there working over there. But you have to ask what's the exit strategy, whether you will sell it out or whether you will get it actually refinanced from a bank, or you will sell those condos, how I will get back the funds. Because one thing you need to understand, that in any capital structure over there, wherever you be on that line, if something goes wrong, then you'll be in trouble. It doesn't matter whether you are into a mezz loan or secured loan or at the the preferred equity or the general equity. So these are a really few good things which you could have asked from that perspective. And only marks to us when we select the project, like as I told you that we are vertically integrated, we are into the luxury building of luxury condos. So the project right now we have selected it's a rural project, but it's a very luxury rural project with a set aside visa where we already backed out all the sources of funds, and we have started aggressively marketing that project because of that all the set aside cushion 20%. And even we didn't start the project yet, it's under a permit process, but we already filed 15 investors on that project. So we are only looking for 76. So the way we work out, the way we structure, it's completely foolproof from every perspective.
When I began my career, I did something called commercial mortgage-backed securities, and the law firm I worked for was a big fancy law firm, and the deals were billions of dollars. And here's the thing, the first thing I was taught is basic due diligence, and I was taught that you always visit the project site. So I would encourage you to visit the project site. Like on behalf of our investors, I've been in Houston, I've been in their condo buildings, I've seen it. I've walked the High Line with one of your colleagues and seen the project in New York. I've certainly been inside a lot of Matt's projects. And then the lady over the head, she has projects in Washington, D.C., and I've certainly been in those. So if I can do that as a lawyer, it's your money. You know, I would suggest very basic due diligence things. And one of them, if you can, is visit the project site. Would you agree? So we're coming towards the end of the time. So perhaps what we'll do is just give everybody the opportunity to give one tip. If you're thinking about EB5, what would be your most significant tip, Matt?
Sure, it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier. Right now, it's a great time. You're talking about a fresh program. You're talking about one that now has these protections that are put in place for the investors, and you're going to jump the line. And so understand that as time goes by and as interest continues to build, now that people are better understanding how the program has changed, that line is going to grow under these new set-aside categories. And so that line is not going to stay short forever. And so what I would leave people with is that now is really a great time for EB5. Certainly there's been economic turmoil that's come out of COVID, and we're still continuing to deal with that with interest rates and things like that. So I think what you need to be doing is you really need to be doing due diligence. You need to work with experienced, trusted regional centers. Just like I said earlier, you do need to compare and contrast the projects, and you need to pick one that you're comfortable with. But I would really be focusing on the track records of those groups. What have they done? If they have had challenges, how have they solved those challenges? Because that's going to tell you a lot about the character of that regional center. And so, again, great time to move into EB5. We've got a booth immediately just outside this door, so if you're interested in any of our opportunities, I'd love to talk to you about them.
Thank you. My clients are focused primarily on visa strategy, which includes timing. They're focused on identifying sources of funds, which is critical to the US program, which requires tracing of the capital invested in the United States. And then they're focused on project selection. So you have some of the best regional centers in the business right here on this panel. Talk to them. That's the project selection side. On the visa strategy side, on the sources of funds side, that's where we come in. This is where we plan how to get you and members of your family into the United States on the basis of this program successfully from start to finish. We offer, obviously, very successful services. I'm proud to say we've done over 3,000 EB5 visas very successfully with the regional centers that are on this panel. So I'm very proud to be sitting here between Ashley and Matt and of course Houston EB5. Sorry, I think at the end of the day, our services are as important as the project, because if you don't have the right advisors, people who know this program with a granular level of knowledge, you're setting yourself up for being at a deficit. And you do not want your lawyer to learn about the program as you are learning about the program. You want your lawyers to be ahead of the game, and we offer those services.
Thank you. I think I would, first echo what was said previously about the time is now. Most of us up here are kind of veterans and have seen EB5 through various cycles, ups and downs. And one thing we can say for sure from back when we were, doing seminars at the height, 6, 7, 8 years ago is the best time to invest is when you have these kind of resets and folks are still kind of figuring out and sitting on the sidelines because once a bunch of folks pour in and the demand increases, whether it's country quotas or caps or processing or USCIS being overwhelmed and things like that from a resource standpoint, it just becomes more competitive and a bit harder, I think, from the investor standpoint versus right now where we've kind of got this fresh opportunity. And then I think the second thing that I would echo, we've all kind of talked about projects and regional centers and track records, but I think we all appreciate, still what a big decision this is. And so, my parting wisdom in selecting a regional center, some of the stuff is obvious, the track record, the projects, et cetera, and everyone has offerings, but it is a relationship and it is a multi-year relationship. And so as with anything in business and life, it's about who you feel like you can establish that relationship with and who has a track record of kind of navigating that process. And to Matt's earlier standpoint, who as you navigate the visa process, who's still going to be there 5-10 years active in the business, advocating for you and staying in that relationship.
I think just like sort of my turn. Ignacio is right that there's two parts to this process, right? One is doing your source of funds properly and presenting a case properly. That's what we lawyers do. And then two is making sure that there's a good product. Now we do some due diligence, but Regional Center does that. EB5 sometimes gets a bad rap, and I know Ignacio does a very good, thorough job. For source of funds, just to give you an idea, we've never had a source of funds denial. And we've done, like Ignacio, hundreds and hundreds of EB5s. And our RFE rate is exactly, just slightly under 3%. So I'm not saying that to say we're especially good or especially bad. I'm just saying that actually, if you do things properly with a great deal of attention to detail, like Ignacio's firm does, and I hope our firm does, then the risk of having problems with EB5, and if you do proper due diligence on the project, it's actually pretty low. That's the piece I would add to that.
Thank you. Yes, I would echo, do your due diligence, choose a regional center with a long track record, and then if it's important to have your petition adjudicated first and you'd like to be at the front of the queue, well then you know who to go to. That's me.
So my advice, I always told any prospective lead who comes to me, and this is from I would say bottom of my heart, that you have the best regional center here. You can speak to anyone, but I always told investor that the first thing you do, you go through a few regional center, whatever you want to work with that. But the best thing which you could do, go for a premium attorney, because attorney is the only one who would be your custodian. If you come to me, I will tell you I'm the best. If you come to someone else, everybody will tell you they have the best product offering, and we all have the very successful track record. You go out and you all see all the regional center, they have 100% approval rate. They've finished many projects in the past. Most of the regional center, good regional center, have a very impressive track record from every perspective, and everybody has been doing a great job. But the one who can protect you, that's an attorney. So I always told people, anyone comes to me, I always refer to 2 to 3 attorneys. Just go and speak to them, because if you select a premium attorney, your 80 to 90% job is being done, because he will be your custodian, he will be a protector. He will be the one who will be doing the due diligence on every project. He will give you pros and cons of us, or CMB, or US Immigration, or EB5 coast to coast. And then definitely it's a life-changing decision which you are making, and that decision you have to make into, like as Mark told earlier, you have to visit every project but everything will be guided to you to attorney. I'm a big fan of that. In terms of that, anyone who wants to look into that, go and select a premium attorney, engage him. He will make your life much easier instead of you do a due diligence on your own. That's my the advice to every investor, whoever comes in. Thank you.